You are listening to the Special Needs Children podcast with Chitra Iyer. Chitra Iyer is a parent of 22-year-old Shravan Iyer who has epilepsy, cerebral palsy and autism. She is the CEO of MFA and has been helping families with life-centered planning to reach their personal financial goals. She is also a trustee of the parent support group, the Forum for Autism, which was set up almost 2 decades ago. MFA is a 16-year-old organization working in the personal finance space. They have set up a dedicated practice to help families with special needs children to plan their financial goals and invest for the same. The thoughts shared here are as a result of discussions with parents, caregivers, siblings and professionals regarding the planning of a person with special needs. In this expert series podcast, Chitra is talking to Miss Chaula Badiani. Chaula Badiani has been a practicing occupational therapist for over 20 years and runs the Reach Therapy Center for Children in Mumbai. Listen to her in conversation with Chitra Iyer, where she shares how she helps families articulate and achieve, starting with what are their wishes and dreams for their child in the next 6 months.
Hi, a big warm welcome to you on this expert series of my podcast for special needs children. Thank you for your time, dear Chaula, and agreeing to do this interview with me.
Thank you, Chitra, for having me here. It's absolutely my pleasure being here and getting to spend time with you.
Most welcome. For all of you, Chaula is one of the kindest and most genuine therapists who has helped us with our son. And I have seen how she has been able to create a passionate team who does the same for many families. Just to introduce you formally to our listeners today, Ms. Chaula Badiani has been a practicing occupational therapist for over 20 years. She holds a master's degree in occupational therapy and sensory integration certification from the US and is a certified aquatic therapist. She founded Reach Therapy Center for Children in 2011 and currently serves as the director of Reach Therapy Center for Children. Her special interests lie in combining a variety of approaches to create a holistic family-centered approach to serve the goals set in conjunction with families for the children. It is her mission to evolve conscious awareness and acceptance in the community about individuals with special needs and create pathways for inclusion and accommodations, especially for individuals with invisible neurodevelopmental conditions such as the autism spectrum. Diving straight to our interview today, Chaula, first question coming to you is, why did you choose to be an occupational therapist? Can you please share your journey with us?
Absolutely, Chitra. Once again, thank you for having me here and thank you for having me as part of this very important ongoing discussion that you have as part of your podcast. As far as me being an occupational therapist, actually it's funny because when I got into the occupational therapy program at Nair Hospital, fabulous program, but what I ended up seeing were a lot of children that had more acute needs. So I would see kids being poked with needles, I would see kids needing surgeries, I would see families in distress. And when I graduated from the OT bachelor's program, I decided this is not something I can handle. I cannot see kids and families in so much pain. And then I was at home after my internship and trying to figure out the next steps of my life. Sure enough, I was talking to my friend and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "There's a volunteer position at one of the special schools in Ghatkopar. And if you're still figuring out what you want to do, why don't you do that?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And they were providing occupational therapy services. And of course, I was qualified. So I went ahead and did that. And I did that for 2 months, Chitra. And that experience was life-changing. I saw whatever little knowledge and whatever little skills I had at that point, that I could make so much of a difference in their life, in their personality, in their confidence, in their ability to take on the world. And these, I'm talking about the little kids. They would come in happy and looking forward to learn more and do more. And the families were so grateful that their kids were making so many changes in such little time. And that's when I decided I can't be anything else. I got to do this, and I got to do this much better than what I'm already doing. So that's when I pursued my master's, and I went to the US, and I did my master's there for 2 years. I got every possible certification under the earth to make me a better therapist. I worked there for a few years, and I've been back for many more years now. And that's been the beginning of my occupational therapy journey. And to this day, I say that I'm a lifelong learner, and this is what I love doing. And I won't be doing anything in this lifetime, anything else in this lifetime at least.
That's simply awesome, Chaula. Thank God, you took this up. So, can you please share that, do families really understand what you're doing for them as an occupational therapist, whether it's for children or for adults?
So absolutely, Chitra. I feel like, when I compare what I did as a volunteer 20 years ago to what I saw when I came back and what I'm seeing now, there's definitely a lot more awareness. There's definitely a lot more understanding, and more importantly, there is definitely a lot more openness to seeking the help that the families need, and that their understanding of what their child needs is. It's the landscape has changed a lot over the years. I feel like it's still evolving and it's still changing a lot. um, but I see families accepting the needs of their child. I see families working towards the needs of their child. I still feel like a lot of times, my work still involves creating awareness of what could be and what can still be. And a lot of times my work involves creating awareness of the scaffolds that we could be providing as parents to make life simpler for the children and for the growing adults. Um, but overall, I've been feeling very positive about how families want and seek OT services.
That's great, Chola. Um, you know, it is overwhelming for a parent to, know that they have to do X, Y, Z, so many things. And also, when they land up in front of somebody like you, who can clearly handhold them and tell them very objectively that these are the goals that we will work on, which is the way you and your team do it. You break down the long-term goals into much shorter ones that can be accomplished, and that genuinely helps. I'm sure it helps all the families with the overall confidence of being able to do the best for their child. Moving on to the my favorite topic, and what I have been repeatedly asking many people through my podcast is, so Chola, how do you guide families who come to you with future planning for their children? What do you do? How do you encourage them to think about it?
So one of the things that I began with a lot of the times, actually all of the time, with the families is, you know, two big areas that I force them to think about. And a lot of families, generally, when they come to me, have not thought about this because they've gone to all these professionals and all these doctors and all these therapists who have told them, this is what your child can't do, this is what your child is not good at, this is what we need to work on, this is what they're struggling with, all of that. So I just feel like a lot of the times the parents come in thinking that it's so much harder, and the things are so much more difficult for my child, that there are no positives. So the number one question I ask them is, what are your child's strengths? And I think that's something that not many people ask them about their children. And when I ask them, Chitra, they will turn around invariably and ask me, what do you mean, like in terms of OT or in terms of what? And my answer to them is always, what are your child's strengths as a person? And then, of course, you can add to me in your answer what your child's strengths are in OT. But this is something they get blown away that really my child has strengths. So I think that's one perspective that they really need to look at, that their child is a child with personalities like any other children, with abilities like any other children. The abilities may look different, but they're there, and we just need to tap them. Um, and how do we plan on tapping them in a way that is a successful and a positive experience for the child as well as the family? So that's the number one question I ask. The second question I always ask is, and this I ask because it's easier for a lot of families to answer this and to think about this, is that what do you wish your child was doing differently? And again, this is a very purposeful question. I don't ask them, what do you wish your child starts doing in 6 months' time? Because I get a whole list of, my child should be speaking, my child should be walking, my child should be, running, my child should be doing what their friend is doing, all of that. That's not my intention with this question. My intention is, what are your wishes and dreams and hopes for your child in the next 6 months? Which is why I always ask, what do you wish your child is doing differently? And I think that also gives them a unique perspective to think about, that how could their life be different, and therefore how could the family's life be different as well. And then tying these two questions to the future plan. I think when the families are new, asking about, where do you see your child 5 years down the line, or where do you see your child when your child is an adult, can be quite overwhelming and stressful for parents when they're just trying to get through to the next day, right? Or the next academic year, for a lot of the families. So we start with this, and then with education, with awareness, with time, it takes effort, it takes understanding, of each other, like the family and the therapist. Then we work towards, okay, where are you in 5 years time, and what are the steps we need to follow to get there? So I think it's essentially switching between that micro perspective, then going to the macro perspective, and then bringing it back down to the micro, that, okay, now that you know what the macro is going to be, what else do we need to do? Or what else can we do? Or what are the other scaffolds? And do these scaffolds need to come as skill building for the child? Do these scaffolds need to come as environmental changes in the home? Do these scaffolds need to come, through supports and changes or accommodations in the school? Do these scaffolds need to be, accessed through families and friends or neighbors? What can we do to get there? And so there's a whole lot of different aspects involved, which is why it's always an ongoing dialogue.
That's really, really fantastic, Chaula. In continuation to what you said, does the entire family get involved in these discussions? Do they bother to ask someone else to also talk to you?
That really, Chitra, is very different for different families. We've had families in the past coming here, and sometimes it's just the mom, sometimes it's the mom and dad, and sometimes we have families coming with mom, dad, grandparents, uncles, aunts, everybody. So it's really unique to each family, and it's really different for each family. But by and large, we always, when we set up meetings, when we set up initial assessments, we always encourage and want both the parents at least to be here, because I think they are the important decision makers, and they are the ones for whom this is going to have the most impact. So as far as future planning, and as far as understanding goals, or understanding needs, or understanding what we are working on, we definitely have the immediate family involved. As far as reach is concerned and we are concerned, we also insist that over the ongoing sessions, we would like the family members to be here, which would be mom and dad, or mom or dad. And sometimes it's tricky because sometimes the parents are working, both the parents are working, they can't be here. In which case, then we make time to have a conversation, over the call or WhatsApp. We sometimes have done things like we've had a notebook which gets passed back and forth, if the family has just crazy hours. But our aim is always to have the family as intricately involved as we can. If the grandparents are involved, that's such a pleasure, because they have a whole unique perspective to offer as well. And a lot of the families, when the children are spending time with the grandparents, it's such a different stimulus for their play skills, for their leisure skills, for their social skills, for the communication, all of it. So, short answer to the question, the more the better.
Yeah, Chola, I totally get what you're saying, because even in our place, you know, literally every single family member has come and visited Reach, including friends and neighbors. And it has always been such a pleasure, where each one has interacted with you and all of them know you as the extended family. So, continuing there, Chola, can a therapist, actually help a parent with guiding them on all, various aspects other than what they're actually sitting down to do for the child? That is, suppose I were to talk about financial planning, or these kind of, future planning related discussions in terms of where is the kid going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Do you think parents would listen if you spoke to them about this? I know that we've spoken about pretty much everything under the sun, but what has been your experience, and what would you tell families to how they should listen to a therapist, as well as what would you tell the therapists, the professionals? How should they take this on?
Um, so I think we have a definite and a very unique advantage, Chitra, as therapists, because ours is the way our services work. Children do come to us once a week or twice a week or thrice a week, depending on what the goals are and what the needs of the child and the family are. And I think that puts us in such an advantageous position, because we are the ones that the families interact with the most. Like you said, I'm extended family for you guys, and so are you for us. And it's because, like it or not, we're spending those many hours together each week. And sometimes we are the ones that parents come up and ask questions to, which they will not ask anybody else, or will not feel comfortable bringing up in front of anybody else, because there is that relationship of trust, and there is a relationship that I can talk to this person without any judgment. And again, like it or not, we do end up becoming sort of informal counselors to a lot of the families, and we're not trained for it. Over the years, it just, because of our, like I said, because of the unique position that we are in, we sort of develop the skills to support the families in the way that we can. And if we can't, then guide them that, okay, this is the person you need to see, because this is the area in which you're looking for help. And whether that's a developmental pediatrician, that they just need question answered, or whether it's a unique communication related issue, or it's an AAC related issue for which they need to see a speech therapist, or it's a mental health issue for the child or for themselves for which they need to see a counselor. I think we are the ones that sort of can point them in the right direction. That's one of the aspects. I also feel like with time, and because of the trust that I said comes with the territory, and we are also uniquely placed to know the culture of the family most closely. And when I say culture, I don't mean like a religious culture. I mean, what is this family like? What are the values of this family? What is this family hoping for? How does the family interact with each other? Those are all things that we are witnesses to because we are spending so much time with them. And I feel like that's also very important in guiding them correctly, because as a therapist, I find that a lot of professionals take the role of an expert and say, you need to do this, or you have to do this 20 times in this week, or you have to do this 5 times in a day. But if that's a working family where that's just not possible, and that's the expectation of the professional, that's just not going to happen. So again, just that understanding of what this family is looking forward to, what works with this family, those are all very real and very practical considerations, which are helpful in guiding them. As far as what can professionals do, I think the number one thing is, being there empathetically while supporting the child, and looking at the bigger picture becomes more important. So over time, I find that a lot of families will come to us and say, oh, we've been going here for so many years, but now we find that we're stuck. So as a professional, being in the situation where you're helping them and become part of the families, yet being able to, distance from the situation to see that, okay, what are the next steps for this family? What will work now that the child is a teenager? The things that I was doing, or the things that the family was doing in the past, are no longer going to be valid and applicable. We need to find a different way. We need to find a different approach that still works. And those are the things that we need to start thinking about as professionals. So looking at the developmental, challenges, the unique developmental challenges that come across at different stages, I think as professionals, that's very important. Also, I find that as professionals, parents are more likely to come to you for the next steps if you have shown them that these are the next steps, or this is what you can look forward to, or this is how you work towards it in a way which is easy for parents to do, and realistic for parents to do. So again, having that sense of how do I break it down so it's easy enough yet achievable and can be done, but it's still a reach for the child, that would be the piece to really start thinking about. As far as parents and what they would want to listen to, I think, to separate out that what is important for me and my child. I think in today's day and age, there is just so much input from all these different WhatsApp groups and, many, many different places. There's the internet where you read about things and where you read about other people doing other things, and you want to do what they are doing because they just look like, social media makes it look like they're so successful at what they're doing. But I think take a step back as a parent and think about where your child is at and where would you like your child to be, and not have that your sort of trap of comparison or trap of, oh, but this makes me look like this, or this makes my child look like this, sort of get you down. But again, there needs to be that relationship of trust with the therapist. Sometimes therapists say, but no matter what we do, it won't get done or it won't get heard. So the what we need to look at is, where is the breakdown happening? Those are the things that I would think about in this therapy process. And I would really caution the parents from, getting into this trap of somebody else is doing it, so let me just try and do it, because if it's worked for them, it might just work for my child. Yes, but no, because your child is not their child. Your family is not their family. So really having that perspective, and it becomes hard over the years when you're working, you have so many issues, managing time, managing households, managing education, managing future, all of that. But really, sometimes just taking a step back and thinking about what is the challenge or what am I looking to achieve and who can I talk to about it, um, is really going to be the thing to do.
So I absolutely loved what you said, and I think it's true for so many families just like ours that uh, you know a lot more about what's happening in our lives with our child. I think much more than anybody else who's there in our lives. You're able to understand and actually guide us better, and uh, the stronger the bond between the family and therapist, it's a complete win-win for the child and for the family and for the therapist. So thank you for being so involved and being so considerate and genuinely caring for everything that's going on in a family's life. Thank you to you and to your team. I want to move on to what I keep talking to, where every single family that I meet, primarily about financial planning and how people need to have finances in place earlier on in life, and not to, there is too much on the plate already that you're trying to do for your child, but at the same time, this is one very very important aspect that can make or break, or literally give you a lot of confidence in terms of everything that you want to attempt to do for your child. So I have a very pointed question for you. That suppose I tell you that, hey, can you please tell parents that they need to also look after this aspect in terms of money for the child, be it today in terms of therapy, or 10 years down the line when maybe the child is going to be able to work at a particular place or not. How do you think families would react to you? Would they listen to you?
Um, I think, Chitra, this is a question best directed to you. Obviously, you are the financial expert, and I know we all come to you anytime we need help on this. But as far as us, again, being in a unique position, what I said about being witnesses to the families and the family's life, um, would give us the position and the ability to guide them. Obviously, we won't know all the nuances, but we can help them be aware of what's coming. So the number one question that parents do ask often of us as therapists is, how long do you think my child is going to need services, and how many times a week? Because I think that comes from, for a lot of parents, from the aspect of, how do I manage my finances? And it's very realistic for them to ask that question, and very, very practical for them to ask that question. Um, a lot of times as therapists, unfortunately, we don't have a very straightforward answer to that. Not because we don't want to be, completely open and transparent about it, but it really depends, right, on what the child's needs are and how quickly the child progresses. For a lot of the kids, again, depending on what the goals are, what are the challenges, what are we setting out to achieve, children could be done in 6 months or a year or 2 years, versus for a lot of the kids, it's really a support that they need through the rest of their lives, and the frequency of that might change, but that's something that's going to be ongoing. And transitioning into adulthood, that might look like we need to consult with our therapist once a week, or once in 2 months, or once in 3 months, but that's still a very real expense. And also, depending on which stage your child is at, you might need to do that much more planning. Like if you have a young child, then you know that you have to plan for therapies, you have to plan for your home expenses, you have to plan for educational expenses. um, you might have to plan for other additional considerations, which could be, sometimes the school asks for an additional person to be there in school with the child, and not every school provides that service. And if they do, then they may also ask you to sort of pay for those services. In addition to that, when you're looking at pre-vocational training, then what does that involve? When we are looking at vocational, parents also have to figure out what is the vocational area that my child can be involved in, and can they do it independently, or can they do it, with some sort of supervisory support? And what is that going to look like? And is that something that will be charged as well? Sometimes parents in nuclear families may need to think about, what about my child after me? If it's an only child, or even if it is not an only child, then who's the one that's going to be responsible for my child financially? How closely are the siblings or uncles or aunts involved in this process? And then what does the rest of their life look like? Are they going to stay with the parents, and after the parents, where are they staying? And if they're able to independently stay, or if they can stay with supervision, or they need more intensive supports, and what does that cost? And where are those supports available? So again, many different aspects to think about. I think for parents, this would be a lot of the parents, this would be the most overwhelming piece, Chitra, really to discuss, because then that means that I have to think about where all my child needs help. And right now, while my child is still 5 years or 7 years or 8 years, it's just too much to think about. So again, this is a conversation which, as a therapist, can be had, with genuine love and care over time. But also parents need to hear this, because somebody will need to tell them this. And sometimes, friends and well-wishers want parents to be in a good space, which they do need to be in a good space. But there needs to be somebody that can point them in the right direction, that, this will come up. There could be sudden medical emergencies in the family that will come up. There could be sudden medical emergency with the child. You need to plan for all of it. So while the families and friends are there for emotional support, for moral support, for even therapeutic support, and some other things, that they all have their individual strengths, but this is something that can definitely be discussed with the therapist. And then, of course, Chitra, we would have you, and I know some other professionals also, that could help them with the financial planning piece of it.
Sure. So, yeah, absolutely right. As you know, I have been literally sitting families down and explaining to them about how they need to get going with all the financial as well as legal aspects in terms of this specific area of getting finances in place, because we've also seen COVID do a lot of things. We've seen families losing the person who is the only earning member, and how it impacts them. I feel that some kind of handholding in terms of getting all the various uh, problem areas, various challenges that people refuse to talk about, or kind of shove it under the rug and say that I'll take care of it later in the future. We need to get that going and get that conversation going. So, and thank you, Chaula, for being available to go there and talk to families who are willing to ask you and are willing to listen. That, hey, do I need to do something else for my child? Am I missing something that is extremely important for them? And as we were discussing, it is the parents who need to obviously get all of this done in place before it's too late. And they need so most very often it's one of the spouses who is up and aware and says that, no, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And the second one is lagging, and then, it completely switches. And all of this takes time. Nothing's going to get done overnight in a jiffy. It involves filling up a lot of forms. It involves, visiting a hospital, getting your disability certificates in place, going and meeting a lawyer. All of that happens. And it's very overwhelming. And at that time, when the time needed to focus on just pure intervention and therapy itself seems less, right? Then this feels like, oh my God, why are you expecting me to do all of this? I'll do it later. So, any thoughts here from you in terms of what would you try to tell parents, and siblings? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of siblings coming to you. And as you mentioned, grandparents, that how soon should they start thinking about I'm not just talking about the finances, but the future whole thing about thinking down the line so that all of this kind of gets going.
Chitra, again, I have to say, you have always been the biggest advocate of this, and you just mentioned it right now, that all of this takes time, and all of this takes effort, physical effort, mental effort, emotional effort, because it's intense, right? When you're thinking about all this. And I won't even claim to know about the legal aspects of any of this, because again, you are the expert on that. But answering a question about when does this need to begin, the earlier, the better, for sure. It can, once the family has had some time to, especially for new families, this is not the first place they're going to go. And rightly so. I mean, there's so much emotional trauma happening at the time for the whole family. Like it is trauma. It is something to work through. It is something to sort of, it's a process to come and accept the diagnosis, even for some of the families. But I would say that as the families are working through that process, this is something to work on simultaneously. Like I said, finding out what does it entail, how long will things take, and the earlier you plan for it, the better it is, because as the years go by, there might be additional services needed, or you and I talked about inflation. Things are going to change. Something that costs 500 rupees today is going to cost 2,000 2 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line. So it is going to be needed to be taken into account. Especially, again, if you have other considerations, like if you're living in a joint family and have parents as well that are aging, then there is that to be taken into account. If you have more than one child, if they have a sibling that is a special needs or not special needs sibling, then you also have to plan for their future. So it is going to be an immense effort if you try to do it when your child is 21, and it might be too late at that point. So the earlier, the better. You said, what does it look like for other family members, and what does it look like for siblings? Now that's another discussion that the parents need to have, that what is the sibling's role in this, and how much are we expecting out of the sibling, and is it right to expect things out of the sibling? Sometimes siblings themselves want to help out, which is great, but is it really a responsibility that they are willing to take, or is it a responsibility that's sort of been put upon them, is the other factor to consider, because it is a big responsibility, and not everybody might be equipped for it, or not everybody might want to be equipped for it, right? So again, having those open, honest discussions, even when the child is younger, for the parents and for the whole family, becomes important.
I think that was fantastic, Chaula. Having someone as participative as you in our lives, if I may say, it really helps us think a lot more clearly. I know that it has given us a lot of clarity about what to expect in the near term and in the longer term. It's so helpful when you break it down and you really explain how families should think about achieving various goals for the child. And of course, being blessed with somebody as genuine as you, who thoroughly cares about the child and the entire family, really makes our life much more easier and helps us feel very confident about how to go ahead, continue working with our children, and of course, simultaneously enjoying lives with them. So thanks a ton for being part of this interview of this expert series of my podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much, Chitra, one more time. And again, the discussions that you have are so powerful, and they're um, very emotional and very intense for a lot of the families. But you try and bring it about in such a way that it's easy to hear and easy to listen and easy to implement. So you've always been an inspiration, and to me personally, and continue to be an inspiration. So I can't thank you enough.
You were listening to the Special Needs Children podcast with Chitra Iyer, the CEO of MFA and a trustee with the Forum for Autism. If you find this podcast relevant and interesting, it'll be great if you leave a review, share, like and subscribe. You can also let us know if there is any specific topic that you would like us to cover. Feel free to email her on chitra.iyer@myfinad.com, or you can call her on 98337 85892.